His Excellency John Dramani Mahama abusia maneboni echemu echese papai akopie mu ewo Japan no kopie mu Japan abontin so abusia wa makwa oba no na echese watumi awini eye investors achese omo ede omo sika ede ba be hye Ghana agrek echese kuaye pa mo de sika over $100 million na de ba be wuram na abusia anso ha eyade UN secretary asanso atumi abo ye papa ya baso a enya asem keto abusu abaso boy de abo His Excellency no ano edin His Excellency ebetina konwa so no eyade a His Excellency John Dramani Mahama Ghana for ebo ni din papa na ensem o mo kan na se papa e listening president bi mo say oye abai papa. In fact, he came for the people. Bi mo so say His Excellency John Dramani Mahama the Akroma of our time abusa we dey ma mekasa wan pese ye kone kokoti ensem a Ababe told you His Excellency John Dramani Mahama just to the extent said UN Secretary atumi aboy papa ya baso a enya asem keto how does so be media jecha busa say enen dey connect to channel so a ene dey kwanse be so be me no ahwe videos ni bi a wodi answer obe subscribe amaye no be notification bar so for more podcast updates yan kone kwoti nsem a I told you His Excellency John Dramani Mahama
the answer is simple. It's that the demographics have changed, and that the majority of the population in Africa is youthful. And so there's no way you can grow a successful economy without investing in the youth. The youth form 60%, if you take the age category of between 16 and 35, they form 60% of Africa's population. And so that's not a demographic you can ignore. But aside from that, the world is changing, and it's now a knowledge economy. The youth are interested in certain sectors that are not the traditional sectors. And so in the creatives, in the renewable energy space, even if they go for traditional sectors like agriculture, they're looking at agri-tech and other, knowledge-driven aspects of those traditional sectors. And so it is important to find where their interests are and invest in those sectors so that you can attract the youth to go into those sectors. Now, if you look at Africa, in 2024, there was about an investment of 4.2 billion in startups. And a lot of that went into, the biggest majority was about 45%, which went into fintechs. The fintech space is growing at an astronomical rate in Africa, and is mainly driven by smart tech-savvy youth who have seen openings and are taking advantage of it. In all our countries, the change in the economic structure is happening. For instance, in Ghana, in 2015, the services sector overtook agriculture and industry and manufacturing to become the largest sector in our economy, and that's how it should be. And so, for instance, if you take the fintechs, I met the fintech groups, and one of the interesting ones I found was an agri-tech company, and it was solving a problem that we've been struggling with as government for many years, how to extend credit and support to farmers in order that they can increase productivity. And so we had a shot in the dark approach, distributing fertilizers, distributing inputs, and so on and so forth. And you couldn't tell who exactly those inputs were going to and whether you were getting value for money for those inputs. I mean, these young people set up a fintech, they set up a platform, they gave mobile phones to farmers, they distributed to the agricultural inputs to the farmers based on their acreage and their need. And based on the fact that they had them on the platform, they could send credit to them by mobile money. And at the end of the farming season, go directly to the farmer and offtake the production. And that changed it completely. The farmers are able to get a credit score now. And so you can see who's credit worthy and who's not. And so it's changed the face of agriculture. It's changing the face of agriculture in our country. Apart from that, the creative sector and youth startups are adding jobs faster than the traditional sectors. And so if you take the creatives, renewable energy and those spaces, they add about 4 jobs before you can create 1 job in agriculture or manufacturing. And so investing in that sector means that we can absorb more of the myriad of young people who are coming out of school. If we decide to concentrate on manufacturing and industry, Africa needs to turn up about 12 to 15 million jobs a year. You cannot create that in manufacturing and industry and agriculture alone, but the rate at which the creatives and digital space add jobs is much faster than the traditional economy. So it's a place that we must invest as governments in order that we can absorb more of the youth. We know that we say the youth bulge or the huge youth population in Africa is an advantage, but if we do not create enough jobs fast enough to absorb those young people coming out, then it will become a gunpowder keg and it could consume us.
Thank you, Your Excellency. You know, one of the things that you've highlighted here is the volume, the scale of the need when it comes to jobs. Thank you. Yes, I think His Excellency deserves a round of applause there. You have really highlighted the need.
The private sector as partners and not an irritant. In the past times, it's like, oh, this sector is just about profit and all that. And so the public sector had tended to crowd out the private sector. Now everybody uses the hackneyed phrase that the private sector is the engine of growth. But how does an engine operate if you don't give it the right fuel, healthy fuel, engine oil, for it to be able to operate properly? And so that's the role of the public sector. We must create policy that creates the framework for an enabling environment for the private sector to grow. The private sector is not Father Christmas. It will go where it can get a good rate of return on investment. And so it's government's duty to create the space for the public sector to exercise its creativity. And that is what we need to reorient the public sector to do. As Minister of Communications, in the early days when the tech, ICT sector was exploding, and people were coming home and asking for licenses to set up internet cafes. And if you saw our regulator and the conditions you had to meet and all that, I mean, it was just crazy. I mean, by the time you go through that list, you'll not be able to start anything. And so when I became minister, I said, but why license them? If you want to set up an internet cafe, why don't you just open it if you have the investment? And when we did, internet cafes exploded across the country. They didn't cause any harm. They didn't lead to any coup d'etat, nothing. When we're liberalizing our telecom space, they said, oh, telecom is so important. You cannot give it to the private sector. You know, it's sensitive. The CIA would listen into our conversations and all that. I mean, today, look at the telecom sector. It's contributing so much to the GDP of Africa's growth. So what we need to do is to create the right environment for the young people to thrive. We should not over-regulate.
Medawase so wahwe djumedi no besi semri nyame onka ho na wontra wahwe djumedi no koso mesre so be subscribe like djumedi no share na ma afoforo enso ensa inka bi Chondramani Mahama ekasa yenko ni konkote yensama odito aso.
I met with the fintechs last year during the campaign, and I was asking them, what are your problems? And they said, over-regulation. Why don't you ease it up so that we can invest more? And so I think that we must not be too sensitive in guarding and trying to regulate and all that. We must create the space so that these young people can exercise their creative talents and contribute to sustainable growth in our countries.
Your Excellency, please keep your mic for a second, because I'm going to fully exploit having you here with us for a few minutes now to ask you.
We wave a magic wand and everything happens. While we expect that we move from just handouts and ODA to trade and investment with our Japanese counterparts, there is also an obligation on us as leaders of Africa to create the kind of space that makes it possible. One, we need governance reform. We need to reduce corruption. We must have accountable governance. Our people must feel that their resources are being put to good use. We must make sure that our economies are stable and predictable, so that if a Japanese investor wants to come and invest or partner with our young people in the service industry or in industry or fintech or whatever, he knows that he has a stable, predictable environment to be able to make that investment, and that he is able to repatriate his profit if he is able to make that profit. And so there's a lot that behoves on us as leadership to create the right platform in Africa for that investment to be able to take place. TICAD 8 pledged $30 billion for investment in Africa. I'd like to see what the audits of that would be, how much went into what. But I believe that the environment in Africa is better now at TICAD 9 than it was in TICAD 8, because now we have the African Continental Free Trade Area. We have the beginning of a basis to bring the continent together, be able to set up in one country, but have a market of 1.4 billion people instead of a market of 33 million people in Ghana. And so we have a better platform today after TICAD 9 than we had after TICAD 8. And like my brother from the African Finance Corporation said, while the African Continental Free Trade Area is a game changer, we still need to put in the infrastructure to be able to trade amongst ourselves. If I want to export something from Ghana to Kenya, tariff-free, duty-free, even though we've signed the protocols, it's most likely that I'll put it on a boat. That boat will go to Europe before it comes back to Africa and to Kenya. And so my freight costs are going to be higher. And so the savings that I make in terms of being able to export duty-free, tariff-free are consumed by extra freight charges. And so there's still a lot that we need to do in Africa to be able to fully tap the potential. But I believe that Japan has the innovation, Japan has the technology, Africa has the natural resources, Africa has the young, innovative people. And if TICAD brings those two factors together, I believe that it would have been worth our while staying in Yokohama for 3 days.
His Excellency John Dramani Mahama as a CEO.
Aha, any against me, ABC, and among them, shall so wash you, ABC, someone or count, and shall wash you, one can say, and the way Diana and consulting, POG media, you know, so John Medino, Nedumedino, in Macram.
Abai Papa, no, or no, any His Excellency John Dramani Mahama, or no, and a year the Akroma of our time. I say, send him for a Bopa Paydi, a Bopa Pay about soon, I just say, I know adding. He papa ye kopie mu ewo eye Japan aboton so e de ensem bi de todwa ewo Japan to the extent say he papa etumi awini eye contract e de investment kase pa e de aba che so de ba bewura eye agriculture mu a over $100 million na busia me